This is Ask an Expat with Marcus and Matt from an Expats Russia, where we answer your questions about what it's like to live, work, and travel in Russia. Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about Russian names and some of the things that we encountered when we first were spending time in Russia that seemed funny or odd to us.
Right.
Matt, what are the top 5 Russian names that you remember?
Oh my gosh. Put me on the spot like that. Natasha, Anastasia for girls, Masha or Maria. Those are probably the top three. I mean, you could do Dasha.
Katya, don't forget Katya.
Yeah, Katya. For guys, they're all, Sergey, um,
Dima,
Dima. What other ones for guys? Pavel is quite common. Um,
Anton,
Anton. Oh,
Andrei,
Andrei,
Sasha,
Alexei. Yeah,
Alexander,
yeah, Alexander.
Alexei.
So you'll meet. It's funny, Marcus. You and I were talking the other day, going through our phones, looking at the Russian language. I mean, I would have like um, Alexei, Moscow, Alexei, St. Petersburg, and you just think like there's so many people with the same name. You need to memorize last names too. Once you start
Right.
learning Russian, it's not that hard to memorize the last names. But I know some of them could be hard to pronounce for newcomers to Russia. But it's just kind of funny how there's so many very common names in Russia. And then I think the hardest thing for people who are coming to Russia is that every name has like the diminutive forms, right? So like Dmitry would be Dima,
Right.
or Sergei could be Seryoja, or Anastasia would be Nastya. And so memorizing all of those, it gets very confusing because someone will introduce themselves to you as Anastasia, and then if it's a more informal context, they'll say, a different person would say, my name is Nastya, and you need to be able to know that Nastya is Anastasia.
You would
And
think
then you're
that
like,
they're different names, yeah.
right, right,
The funny thing about Russian names is, like you said, there's a list of very common names, but when you walk into a room, maybe with a larger audience, you'll if you're talking to people, you'll probably meet 2 Lenas, 3
hmm
Katyas, two Anastasias, two
right,
two or three Andres, and so you're
right,
like, how do I keep them all straight? But Russians seem to have this way to distinguish between all the same names. Like Andrei is Andrusha, or they'll use the cutesy form if they're family or
right.
friend or neighbors. So,
Well, I
and
think you
then
can,
you
you
have
can, you can
you
take
have
one
the
name. Go ahead.
mhm. you have the you have the this superstition in Russia where if you sit between 2 people with the same name, you have you heard that? Like if
No,
you
I haven't
sit
heard that.
in the middle between 2 Katyas or 2 Andres, you what is it? You make a wish, or you never heard that?
No, I haven't. I haven't.
Oh, okay. Anyway, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say, I think if it's a friend group, people have their names. So like, if you have Pavel, right? Maybe one would be Pasha and the other would be Pavlik. Or if you have Nastya, you have Natasha. Or not. If you have Anastasia, you have Nastya. Yeah, I mean, you can create all kinds of different, like derivations from that. It's kind of funny because as you get into Nastya could also be Nastulia or Nash, Nastinka. You have all of these that it's very hard to keep them all straight. But it's funny because Russians, they hear like all these, you know, cutesy forms of the name, but they know exactly what the real name is immediately. I'm getting to
Yeah,
that point
well,
now where I don't even think, and I just know immediately, but like Ivan, Vanya.
right. Or Alexander is the best. I When I first started learning Russian, people said to me, they explained that Alexander and Sasha were the same name, and I thought they're completely different. How can you even? Or like
Well, what?
some Russians will
No, no, no,
say
no, 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 no. One
Sonia
second.
and
One second.
Sofia.
Right. What about you got Alexander, right? Then you have Sasha, but then you also have Shurik.
Shurik.
A lot of Alexanders go by Shurik as well. Or
Right,
like Vladimir, you have Vladimir, you have Volodya, Vavan. I mean, Vavan is like really kind of a little bit too far, but it gets very hard to keep them straight. And then a lot of Americans, if you introduce yourself as Vladimir in America, for example, people will call you Vlad. Well, all of the
right,
Vladimirs that I know, they hate that because in Russian, Vladimir is Volodya, not Vlad. Vlad
right,
is Vladislav. So
right.
it gets very hard to keep them all straight. I think for a lot of
But
foreigners going
have
to
you been
Russia.
in the situation where Russians will argue with each other about how to like use the other form of the name? Like some people
No.
say that uh, Ksenia is part of Oksana, and my wife's name is Oksana. And she's like, no, those are two different names. It's Ksenia and Ksusha.
Right.
So they'd
So what would be
call
the?
Oksana Ksusha, even though Ksusha is the cutesy form of Ksenia. And she's
No,
like,
I've never
no,
heard
that's
that.
not right. Or
So what would
Sofia and
Oksana be?
Sonia.
Right. Right. So
Oksanочка.
I Oksanочка. Huh.
Now, I mean, Oksana is one of those that you really don't actually have a different form for.
Huh. Interesting. Well, I think what's even more funny is when Russians. I don't know about Oksana if she's come up with names for you, but like my name's Matt, right? And then Russians, they'll come up with like from Matvey, right? So you could do like Matyushka.
Okay.
It just sounds like absolutely ridiculous to me. Or Matyucha. That's what Sonia will call
Uh
me
huh.
sometimes. Matyucha.
Uh huh.
Uh, but yeah, I think it's even more funny when they try to come up with the diminutive names for Western names that you don't have in Russian. What about you? Has anyone
Yeah.
like what does your mother-in-law
Uh,
call you? Does she call you Marcus?
Marcus. Yeah, she doesn't. She doesn't call me anything else. I mean, that's kind of a hard name to like make to add
Right.
something to at the end. But when we were, when we had our kids, and when you're, um, if you're having a kid in Russia, you think of the patronymic, right, for the middle name,
Right, right.
and people were like, "Oh, are you gonna call your daughter, you know?" So my younger daughter, Alexa Markusovna Hudson. It's like, no, we're not gonna do a
Right.
patronymic.
Right. Everyone asks me, "Are you going to give patronymic to our daughter, Matveyevna?" I'm like, "No, that has nothing to do with. Why would we do that?"
Right, right. But
So,
the funny thing is now that my kids, so their names are Zoe Jane,
uh-huh.
Alexa, and Harvey. But when they talk amongst themselves in Russian, they'll be like, so my wife and my older daughter will call Alexa like Alexachka or
Uh-huh.
Alex, like with the Russian,
Mm-hmm.
pronunciation, and then they'll call their little brother Harvey or uh, what do they
Harvichka.
say? No, they'll say Harvik. Harvik.
Harvik. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like
Harvik.
Harvik. Yeah, so you can kind of take the foreign names and add the Russian cutesy form at the end.
Right. I think it's also hard for foreigners to know what level of cutesiness or diminutive you can actually use, right? An example for me is my brother-in-law, his name is Pavel, right? Well, every Pavel I've ever met who's been informal, they've said their name is Pasha. Well, my wife then calls him Pavlik, right? Which is like a
Uh
next
huh.
level down, which is kind of like a only family level, or maybe even some of his friends might call him Pavlik, but I think most of them say Pasha. And it's sometimes hard to navigate actually what you should call that person, right? Because if I'm visiting my wife's family, he's always Pavlik within the family house, right? They'll say Pavlik to
If
his
you say
face,
Pavlik, it'd
call
be
him
weird.
Pavlik. Right. Well, I don't know. I think obviously all Russians look on foreigners and they think, wow, it's okay if they make a misstep like that, right? But
Right.
because I don't remember now, 5 years later, 6 years later, how did he introduce himself in the beginning? That's probably how I should call him.
Right. Right. Um, I kind of joke with my daughters sometimes because they obviously they speak Russian with mom. So um, I'll say something like they'll say something like, "Oh, there was a Russian kid at the store, or at the playground, or at kindergarten, whatever." And I said, "What's their name?" And they'll say, "I forget. I can't remember." I say, "Dasha, Pasha, Masha, Kasha," and I like just because Daria would be Dasha, right?
Right.
Uh, Pavel would be Pasha. Masha would come from Maria.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Are there any? Anyway, they all end in Asha, and then Kasha is like hot cereal. And so I just
Right.
kind of name all these things until they start laughing because they're all names, four names, and then the rest I just make up.
Right. Right. But anyway, let us know in the comments what the experience you've had with Russian names. I know we've got lots of comments in real life, like how do you keep them straight? It'd be interesting to know what our viewers think when
Right.
meeting Russian
I
people.
still mix up some to this day, so it's not
Well,
that big
you
a deal.
started asking. You said Russians argue about it. I've definitely heard Russians make mistakes and calling
Right.
people by the wrong name. So you
Right.
do what you can, but it's a very complex topic. I'll see you in the next video. This was Ask an Expat with Marcus and Matt from an Expats Russia. We hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have a question about Russia, let us know in the comments. We'll answer it in another video.